Edward Linley Sambourne, born in 1844, was a graphic artist that lived in Victorian London at 18 Stafford Terrace, together with his wife Marian and children Roy and Maud. For most of his life, he worked as the chief cartoonist for the satirical magazine Punch, and his work was shown regularly at the Royal Academy of Art. Linley's surviving diaries are filled with notes on his work and life, revealing that Linley was a man wedded to routine. At the same time, he strikes us as a humorous character, enjoying his creative profession and life to the utmost. The Sambournes evidently led a very active social life, filled with dinners and theatre, travel, visits to galleries, the British Museum, pantomime, or even the occasional boxing match. This part of the calling, with Tasha Marks as a food historian, will take us to explore some of the food of the time and dive into fashion and politics of the Victorian table of the late 1800s. The theme is good dinner and a full one. When looking at the diaries of Sambourne, dinner invitations would have been much more frequent than actually hosting dinners at 18 Stafford Terrace. And illustrious dinners, they were fun to go to for everyone, of course. And in Victorian times, I think it was also quite common and accepted not to have to invite people back to yours if you were invited to a big dinner elsewhere.
Not necessarily, yeah. You had to return the invitation, but it didn't have to necessarily be your house.
Yes. In 1891, Sambourne actually got an invitation to dine at Lord Frederick Leighton's house the first time, and he notes that in his diary, and he says that dinner was so-so and left him with an upset stomach, but he certainly loved the sort of idea of it, entering that artistic circle and having the company of the Royal Academy artists around him. And I think, Tasha, as a food historian artist yourself, what do you make of reading the Sambourne diaries and thinking about that aspect?
I think Sambourne's diaries show us that Victorian dinner parties were not just about the food, but actually so much about the entertainment, the enjoyment, the conversation. And actually, I'd love to have gone to dinner at the Sambournes. I mean, the food might not have been the best, but it was definitely a lot of, the drinks were free-flowing and the conversation was flowing. So I think that even though they might not have the same social status as someone like Frederick Leighton, they still knew how to throw a party.
Yeah, definitely. I think also in the 1890s, later on, when sort of the Sambournes done up the house even more and had the lovely wallpapers and it was getting more lush, they were more likely to have people over for dinner. And I've got a dinner menu here, which was in 1896 on 20th of July, and 8 guests were served, and I'm going to read out the menu to you. So we start with hors d'oeuvre, caviar, clé soup, sol vin blanc, crème de volaille, cold, tongue and mushrooms, roast lamb, peas and potatoes, French beans, roast chicken, salad, fruit jelly, and Finnan haddock. So that's a bit of a tongue twister to read even, isn't it?
Yeah, quite a light dinner. No, yes. Not really. So, I mean, those multi-course menus were very popular. And actually, Marian and Linley would have done several courses, but some of their more wealthy friends might have done even more, 14, 15 courses.
And I think also from this sort of menu, it's evident that they were definitely nodding to French cuisine. And, it was nice. And it was very much accustomed to have continental kitchen inspire the British dining culture as well?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is sort of classic British fare with a definite French twist. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the language of the menu, they're choosing to say certain things in French. They're choosing to serve certain French dishes because they sound better in French. Yeah. I mean, one of the things we said is sort of cream of chicken. I mean, that sounds rubbish in English. But when you put it on a menu in French, it's all about that pomp and ceremony when it comes to food and about creating a theatre of the table and a theatre of the evening. All the art of conversation, the sort of stuff that Linley would love. I
think also when we think about the French bits to it, the cream of chicken, as you say, it would have probably been Emma, the Sambourne's long-time house cook, who would have prepared that and went shopping to the nearby Kensington shops to buy the things for those meals. Some things would have been brought back from Paris, perhaps pastries, when the Sambournes went on trips there.
Absolutely. I mean, any dinner party like this would have been a huge undertaking for the staff of the house. It would have been a lot of preparation, a lot of clearing up, a lot of anticipation would have gone into that single evening.
you have brought us lots of lovely things on this amazing table, so tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yes, I thought we'd celebrate some Victorian cuisine. We have a lovely jelly, we have a seed cake, we have the really opulent fruit and flowers which you'd find on any Victorian dining room table, or an opulent Victorian dining room table. And also, because we're talking about Linley, who is a cartoonist, we've got some elements in here which are about humour and fun.
I love the legs, so we've got some legs over here.
So we have the little leg nutcrackers, we have the lobster in the fruit bowl, and also in the Victorian language of flowers, which we might talk about a bit later, all these flowers here symbolise laughter, fun, friendship, joy. So that's why we've selected them for the table.
Exactly. So it's the perfect setting for a fun dinner, actually, isn't it?
Definitely.
Linley mentions in his diaries, he mentions sandwiches, ham, leg of mutton, Welsh rabbit, lobster, haddock, suet pudding as well. Do you think also when dinners were served would have been a sort of part of gossiping about after, when someone hosting would have served a lot of potatoes, would they have said, you know?
Oh yeah, I think you'd probably definitely judge someone for serving too many starchy things.
Yeah.
But also it could be very confusing when you turned up at a dinner party, because the service throughout the Victorian era was changing quite a lot. So you'd turn up at one dinner party and everything would be on the table. You'd turn up at another dinner party a week later and everything would be on the sideboard with servers bringing things to the table. And you might turn up at a dinner party a week after that and you would have things served to you in individual portions. So it was very confusing of what was the right thing to do and how much to eat.
I think also because of having this mix of different cultural influences, that perhaps the way of serving sort of was that really busy time. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It also depended on how many staff people had available to serve. If you wanted to do service à la Russe, you needed lots of staff to be able to serve the table. If you didn't have that, then you would have to go for service à la Francais, which is where everything is on the table. The table at a Victorian dinner party would be absolutely full of not only dishes and centerpieces, but also forks and cutlery and glassware. They had something for everything.
We've got some here, so we've got this. What is that type of fork?
What do you think it is for? I'll give you a guess.
Well, when I first saw it, I thought it was something like a hairpin or something.
Yes,
it looks like that.
Like the Little Mermaid, a thing.
Yes, exactly.
This is actually a Victorian bread fork. So it was very bad manners to use your hands for anything on the table. So that included bread rolls. It included, anything you could think of. They had a fork for it.
Yeah. And what is this? What would that be?
You want to guess?
It reminds me a bit of something that you would scoop up, something that's a bit delicate.
Pretty good guess. So that is a sardine fork. So you have the very wide selection of prongs, so you could evenly spear a sardine.
So we're talking about forks, and also the plates the crockery would have been really essential. These are some plates from the 1800s, and they're quite similar to the plates that we see in the dining room at Sambourne House. And how important would have the design or the sort of like the type of crockery been when going out to dine?
I mean, so anything that was on the table was a great way for the hosts to show their identity. So the tableware, the tablecloth, all the cutlery, all the plates, all the ceramics was all a big part of how to show your identity. And what was a big influence around this time was the East. So anything from China or Japan, you have this amazing sort of Orientalism in crockery and in ceramics that you see reflected all across different mediums, actually.
Yeah. I think also when we look at the house, it's quite interesting because we have Grecian patterns in the hallway, we have the chinoiserie and Japanese wallpapers hand-painted, so it's all over. And my question would also be, did the plate or did the sort of designs affect in any way what was on the plate, or not so much in that way?
Yeah, not so much. You had the plate itself was reflecting this worldliness, and then what was on the plate was normally quite British and definitely or European cuisine.
With a French name, perhaps.
With a French name, yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a worldly society, and actually to show your worldliness was something that was seen as very impressive, to show that you have travelled, to show that you experienced different cultures. So all of that, even though it was, you might never have been there, having this exciting tableware was all part of this sort of outward display to your peers.
We are here now talking desserts with Tasha, and I think a passage from The Gentle Art of Cookery by Mrs. C.F. Layle and Miss Olga Hartley, even though a bit later than Victorian times, hits the spot, and this reads, "Make your transparent sweetmeats truly nice with Indian sugar and Arabian spice, and let your various creams encircled be with swelling fruit just ravished from the tree. Let plates and dishes be from China brought, with lively plants and earth transparent wrought." So this is the beginning of the section on creams, custard and jellies in that cookery book. And I think we want to talk dessert, and as the high point to a luscious dinner, what would have been a favourite dessert of Linley's perhaps at a dinner?
I think Linley's favourite, and definitely my favourite, might have been a jelly. So we have one on the table here. Jellies were a great way to have some theatre on the table. The Victorians were the ones who sort of invented the copper jelly mould. So you had these ever more extravagant shapes and forms, and dessert was really a place to be fun and playful, but also be incredibly extravagant. It's about the end of the meal, the sort of the opulent end, to sort of end with a bang.
End with a bang, it is. Where does the word dessert actually come from?
So dessert, as we know it, was sort of founded in the 16th century, 15th, 16th century, and it was a chance for the tables to be cleared for the after-dinner activity. So this was a time where most things happen in one singular room. So dessert originated from people retiring to a different space in the house to eat sweetmeats standing up away from the dining hall. And this is where we get the word dessert from, literally meaning to leave. So this is why dessert has always evolved somewhat separately from everything else. It has that theatre to it, it is ritualistic, and it's separate from maybe the more confined modes of dining.
So when we think today, so we have some candied pansies on the seed cake that you brought, and on the jelly we've got fern, and so the varieties of flowers and greenery that would have been used to decorate and that could have also been eaten. And the fern we can actually eat, is that correct?
Yes, though I did try it earlier for the first time ever, and it's not that tasty.
Yeah.
But they would have used a lot of foliage, a lot of fruits and flowers to decorate all of their desserts. So it was a very opulent place.
Would you have candied fern as well?
You probably could have. I haven't come across it yet, but I think it would definitely work.
Yeah. So I've candied the pansies myself, and it was my first time as well doing that. And I think anything that's quite thin, works to candy and to dry, because it dries out quickly.
Yeah.
So that works. It also reminds me that at one point Maud got given a fern by Mrs. Mackenzie, and Marion notes that in her diary. So again, back to sort of calling somewhere and giving a little present.
Yes. All the flowers had sort of hidden meanings to them. So there's a sort of lost language, a Victorian language of flowers, where the different types of flowers symbolise different things. So the bouquet we have on the table here, I worked with the Lovely Forest to select flowers that have connotations with fun and joy and happiness, which I think Linley would have liked as a cartoonist. He's used to fun and satire and all those sort of things. So the cosmos here, that stands for joy in life and love. And then the pink and yellow roses, they stand for fun and friendship.
And when we think about ingredients, so there is rose water, we've got figs here, the sort of plant extracts, and what are the kind of extracts or plant combinations that we have in Victorian food that is probably less likely to be thought of today?
Well, the Victorians relied a lot on seasonal fruits and seasonal flavours. So that is one thing that is very different from today, in that we're much less reliant on that. So they would have really celebrated the best of British produce. But they would also have had some centerpieces or some sort of highlights that were from further afield. The spices, more exotic fruits like figs, even things like truffles. All these things were appearing throughout the dinner table as sort of highlights. But Victorian cookery really was a celebration of British seasonal food.
And let's talk centerpieces. So the centerpieces we think obviously central to the table and something that would have been there throughout the dinner. And often the pineapple, we've got a pineapple here as well.
Yes.
So this would have been central to the table, and the story goes that sometimes this pineapple would have been not only displayed at one dinner, but perhaps at several dinners. Is that true?
So to have a pineapple as part of your centerpiece was a very iconic thing to do. And not only just to have pineapple so you could eat it, but also to show that you might have grown it yourself in your hothouse. So if it had the top part on it, that was the bit that really showed that you were a a bit wealthier, that you could afford not only to have the pineapple but to have the top. Because if you're growing pineapples, if you chop off the top and plant it, you can grow another pineapple.
So we've just taken a look at the liquor box at Sambourne House, and what kind of serving rituals would have been attached to having brandy, kirsch and so on?
So it was very popular to have a drink after the meal, not only because it gave people a chance to digest probably the large quantities of food they'd eaten, but also it was a sort of a social lubricant for conversation. So it would definitely have been Linley rather than Marion who was sort of in charge of the liquor box. And he would invite people to join him in the room to have conversation, and that would often be as long as the dinner, probably for a couple of hours after dinner, where they could talk and drink and ultimately have a lovely time.
This cake looks absolutely divine.
It smells really good as well. Tell us what's in it.
So this is a classic sort of Victorian seed cake, and this is a very popular Victorian recipe. There are hundreds of recipes for seed cake around, and everyone had their own slight variation. This is based on Mrs. Beeton's version, so the main thing in there is caraway seeds, but I've also added my touch, which is a little bit of cinnamon. This cake represents a lot of the things we've been talking about, because it's about showmanship. It's got classic British flavours in it, like the rose. And it shows European references because of the shape being from Germany. And I think it sums up a lot of the culture of the table around the Victorian era. The jelly is made from gelatine. They would also, in the Victorian era, have used isinglass, which is made from fish guts. This is pork gelatin. And actually, jellies are surprisingly easy to make. They're quite hard to unmould, and I did struggle with this one. But luckily, it was obviously very fashionable to highly decorate your jelly, so you can hide any mistakes under foliage and fruit. But that is a plain milk jelly, also called a blancmange, and it's a raspberry and strawberry jelly underneath as well. And that striped shape is also very popular.
And that's us here at the Protagonist with Tasha Marks from AVM Curiosities.
And in Linley's honour, we've cracked open the liquor cabinet.
Oh yes, we have. We need it.
Cheers! Thank you so much.
Another great dinner.
Thank you.